Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Dave Lenox, Stanford University architect, and I'm a director of campus planning and design. And I want to welcome you to our first lecture in the 2024 Architecture, Landscape, and Urban Design Spring Series. And the theme this year is composition. So composition in architecture and landscape serves as the foundation for creating visually harmonious and functional spaces. The arrangement of design elements such as form, color, texture, and scale significantly influence the overall aesthetic appeal and user experience. Well-composed architecture not only pleases the eye, but also enhances the functionality and the efficiency of the built environment. It plays a critical role in conveying the intended message of a structure or landscape, whether it's monumental landmark, a residential dwelling, or a public space. Ultimately, the careful consideration of composition ensures that design transcends mere construction, becoming a form of art that engages and enriches the human experience. So with that sentiment in mind, we invite you to sit back and relax tonight and enjoy the inspirational work of our two talented speakers. Before we begin, I want to thank Zach Posner, Director of Architecture, works with me, Ethan Woods, the Associate Director of Sustainable Architecture and Engineering Program, Padma Kadipudi, and Jeffrey Tuttle for organizing the series. I'd also like to thank the American Institute of Architects, Silicon Valley chapter, for their help in advertising the series and registering our program for continuing professional education. Please sign up if you need CEUs for this lecture. And I didn't have this memorized, sorry. You know how that is. Our next lecture is in 2 weeks, and we're pleased to have Vanessa Katabian, MVRDV. It'll be held here in the Chem Neuro Research Complex, same time, 6:30. And now it's a pleasure to introduce Sarina Kennerly and Owen Kennerly. Kennerly Architecture and Planning, an award-winning firm based in the Mission District in San Francisco, is the product of an unlikely couple hailing from opposite ends of the country. Sarina from the forested hills of Northern California, Owen from the dense urbanity of Midtown Manhattan, and the work of the firm casts these formative experiences into the design of central spaces and places. Partners Owen and Sarina originally met in 1996 while working for San Francisco architect Daniel Solomon. It's known for innovative housing design and urban infill projects. And Solomon's office was an inspiring environment for two young creatives driven by design, urbanism, and craft. Sarina received both her undergraduate and master's degree in architecture from the University of California, Berkeley, with architectural internships in France for 2 years between the two degrees, and that's really nice. Talk about that later. Sarina successfully leads project teams as well as firm operations that is interested in exploring issues of materiality, sensory experience, and sustainable design. Now, Owen, whose father was an architect, found his way to architecture via furniture design, drawing, and construction. After completing a fine arts degree at Northwestern, he went on to receive his master's in architecture degree from the University of California, Berkeley, assuming that's where you guys met. His approach is collaborative and rigorous, emphasizing communication and thorough evaluation of ideas and materials. Craft and cost effectiveness are not seen as mutually exclusive, and to achieve both, Owen works closely with builders and craftsmen to achieve timeless results within tight budgets. So the firm, starting with custom homes and smaller multi-use infill buildings, is now gravitated to include award-winning mixed-use projects on challenging infill and brownfield sites throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Work at a range of scales from homes to high rises, interior design to urban planning, and the firm has developed a reputation for thoughtful integration of program, constraints, and beautiful design. So let's give a warm Stanford welcome to Sarina and Owen.
You guys want the lights down on the people? Okay, is this working?
Yes.
Thank you so much, David, for the warm welcome. And thank you, Zach, for a wonderful tour of the campus today. That was fun. Thanks to Ethan and all the students. That was very inspiring to be in the studio. We would also like to express gratitude for our team and the clients and consultants we've worked with over the years. An architectural office is a team collaboration, and we are grateful for the wonderful people with whom we work. A special shout out also to Brian Stryzik, who's an important leader in our firm and has been with us since the early days. Owen and I actually did not meet at Berkeley. We originally met working for Dan Solomon, San Francisco architect and urbanist. And we have always had a strong bond, which is essential for navigating our marriage, raising kids in San Francisco, and running a successful architecture firm together. As you will see, Owen is the chatty one, and I am rather quiet, but a very good listener. We both work hard and share curiosity, love of design, sense of humor. We make a great team. When we decided to get married, we designed our engagement ring together and drew it up in AutoCAD for the jeweler. He loved getting such clear direction in millimeters. Owen and I come from very different backgrounds. Owen is originally from the very urban environment of New York City. He grew up with an architect father and a childhood of roller skating through Manhattan, surrounded by the energy and artistic inspirations of New York. I grew up in the wooded hills between Napa Valley and Sonoma, building tree forts and making my own clothes, daughter of an explosives engineer and my mother, the hot air balloon pilot. Such an upbringing was full of sensory explorations, and studying architecture was an opportunity for me to integrate this experiential awareness with building design. I would like to share a small section of text from my thesis graduate work as we gather in a university setting, and our projects from the last 20 years have roots in these ideas. The wall section. So yeah, these wall section studies were part of my analysis. Architectural experience is active, collaborative, and confrontational, with the body constantly interacting through its sense and musculature. The length of a corridor is measured by footsteps, the monumentality of a space by its reverberation, materials by their textures. Architecture is felt by the skin, nose, and ears, as well as the eyes. A truly meaningful work of architecture is enriched not only by representation and iconography, but by a deep integration of materials and light with the poetic idea, so it is understood at a fundamental level through the body's senses.
Materials, of course, are a huge part of conveying experience in architecture. And the point with all this is that you always are feeling, you're always smelling, you're always hearing and seeing, but the point is to make explicit decisions to include those sensory experiences in our design, and not just have it be an accident or a happenstance. This is a material palette from a project that we'll show you a little bit later. But what you see here is basically a contrast between cold material, warm material, hard, soft, translucent, opaque, but also, in addition to the visuals, you have the tactile quality, but also the acoustic quality. So you have the acoustic panels and acoustic slats that we like to work with in our projects as well, creating contrast.
So this first project we're going to show you is a daylight photo studio, and it's located on a rural site north of San Francisco. The landscape engages the senses, the rolling hills, the coastal fog, smells of the grass and cows, fresh air and the sunlight. The owners are wonderful people, very creative and inventive. And they had an old barn, which is the next one, yeah. Which was going to be too expensive to restore and repair it. So we saved the old wood and it was reused in the new barn for the daylight photo studio.
So one of the interesting things was that the old barn, and see this picture here, is looking from the north facing southwest. And the two big cedar trees and then two redwoods. These trees weren't there when the barn was initially built. So in a sense, even though they're considered natural, they were part of a human-made landscape that surrounded the structure. They became givens. This is a sketch, a perspective view of the north. So that other view was basically from, from this corner, in the other direction. So the placement of these trees really became part of the organizational strategy, not only for the building, but for how you access it, but also for how it controls light. The client was a commercial photographer, and he wanted a studio where he didn't need to use artificial lights at all. And so that's a really unusual program, and it's pretty delightful. And also, given what Sarina was talking about, all the light being close to the coast, sometimes it's crisp and sharp, sometimes it's modified by fog, or sometimes it's completely watered out by fog. So the quality of light is this thing that you could play with and actually bring into this creative process. The floor plan of the building is basically a rectangle, both outside and wing off it for farm equipment and workshop. And you can see the trees here. South is down here, north is there. So these trees actually provide shade to the structure, which is a luminous roof coming through. Given that the trees are so close, we actually designed the foundation so that groundwater flows would pass underneath the building, which is deep drill piers, so that we didn't have to compact any soil. We're able to keep trees alive, so this is the building. The barn is within the same footprint, but we basically turned the gable 90 degrees from what it was. That was permitted through the coastal, through Marin County as a barn reconstruction project, and as such, we did not have to go through the coastal commission. We used a prefabricated steel frame structure, kind of like a Butler building. It was actually made by a company called Perka. That's what they call a pre-engineered steel building system, which was very cost effective and allowed us to span about 30 feet left to right, very efficiently.
Yeah, it was a tight budget, so
Very
that's
tight
partly why we came up with that
Yeah, I
solution.
think the foundation was the most expensive part. And the structure is actually, the structural systems are beautiful because these are actually what we call moment resisting frames here. So we provided the rigid connections. So seismically it's raised in that direction. And then there are tension cables that go in the opposite direction. You can see over here this that goes in the, so it's like, yeah, I'll go faster. The skin that wraps this is a skin of polycarbonate. And we actually use the double skin of polycarbonate. See it here. Finding with the joists, and then corten steel, which is basically just rust. Anytime metal out there, it's a little environment, eventually it's going to rust. So let's take veteran steel that rusts naturally like the rigid static sculpture, and it's going to settle. Its habitat.
Yeah.
This is a view from the west. This is the old redwood from the old barn, which we used there. That's right. Transitions. Again, we can see this is the southwest corner, the salvage board for the barn doors, the little polycarbonate. So the barn doors are in front of large steel and glass doors that open. And the whole thing will open up for cross ventilation and both directions.
So the stair is also the recycled wood, and the entry has a low sort of compression feel to it. We like to do that in a lot of our projects where you come in and it feels low, but then it opens up into the space of the whole barn. The double layer of polycarbonate was filtering the sunlight as well as providing insulation in a mild climate. And the owner is very creative. They made these fabric sunshades as well. But it's been a gathering space for community events as well.
But I think it's like sale will turn inside out. Yeah, new sales. Another type of project, this is actually a single family house in San Francisco. On a hilltop with fantastic views. And the experience of this building is really about creating these different residential environments that are typical to a lot of houses, a lot of homes. You want to have private areas, so this is a mashravia. It's a Islamic architectural feature, which is basically like a bay window, but with lattice. So that people inside of it could see out and get fresh air, but not be exposed to the public. Of course, that's important in sleeping areas. The next kind of space is the kind of normative space of a living room, which is almost like a factory or a loft. And the third kind of space is like, the space of study. It's kind of like a special room that everyone can use for sort of specific purposes, for quiet themselves. We call this house the vessel, which you'll see in a moment. Why? It was a remodel of a 1949 row house in Middle Valley, which was only 800 square feet above the garage. Pretty typical on extremely steep street. Our strategy was to take that existing house, which was basically here, stretch it back into the hillside, make that original lower floor the sleeping floor. So it'd be like a private place where most of the bedrooms are. On top of that, we placed an open loft of sorts, which is basically the living, dining, and kitchen spaces. And above that, like a ship in a bottle, or suspended above it, like a ship in dry dock, is this the vessel itself, and then there's this room. That can be a guest bedroom, a yoga studio, place for doing art projects, the so-called room with no name, but that everyone can use and enjoy. Perspective drawing of the front of the house, so you can see how we kept that existing massing. Very difficult to get demolition permits in San Francisco, so this wasn't considered a demolition. But we basically, this kind of mashravia idea, screening the sort of the private spaces. The house built. And so this is a bedroom suite back in here. There's actually a sauna behind here and a little porch. So the screen provides that kind of visual privacy in the mood. Also a garage door down here and bring light into the garage. We use the screen and filter light there. And of course, then we have a guardrail for the living room deck. So this one idea, the screen actually does all these different things and makes a very unified expression of the building. Here, what Sarina was talking about, like this compression and release of the front entry. So as you come up the stairs, it's very tight. It's about 4 feet wide, so it's pretty wide by San Francisco standards, but about 8 feet tall. And when you come through that front door, boom, the space goes all the way up to the top of the building. And here you can see, get a sense of what's going on with this so-called vessel, which is basically this wooden volume suspended from above and pulled in from the sidewalls. San Francisco, you always have this problem with a row house getting light into the middle. A lot of San Francisco row houses are dark in the middle. So a lot of times people will carve light wells or cart rods or anything of that nature. In this sense, pulling it in, but the skylights there was our method of reading.
Yeah, and that's a Venetian plaster wall, so the adds to the luminosity of the light coming in, and the wooden stair and handrail with hemp gives it a warmth, even though it's a very contemporary approach to space. The family wanted it to be pretty open, but still have these warm materials.
And the interesting thing, they didn't want a white box. Then it was the one where we brought a white box into the space that has otherwise been in a short video. And that white box actually has the bathroom and kitchen, refrigerator, and ovens and so forth. That's the kind of rapid white cube in this otherwise building. This is the honeymoon on the other side. This is the skylight here. These are tension braces, because by pulling the building away, suddenly that volume wasn't connected to the shear walls for seismic. So we basically use those places that actually connected with provided lateral load transfer and stuff. It's basically fun, but it's not working that. Yeah, sort of walk through. And then actually the underside of it kind of comes down like this. It's sort of like the Anderson gallery, where it's actually lowest right in the middle. So even though you have that compression at the front door, you get it again when you come to the top of the stairs. At this point, it's about 8'3". So the kind of the ceilings at its lowest, and then from there it kind of splays up. So you're always moving from compression out to a higher ceiling. A little bit more good view over the city. These wood fins on this side because of the hill. That when you're on the sidewalk across the street a little bit uphill, you're actually able to see in because it's like 3 stories up. So these wood fins give some sort of privacy to that. And this is the vessel on top of this corner glazing, this beautiful view of the city. You can see down at night time and slow down. So up till now, we showed you 2 projects that both had beautiful sites. One was a hilltop parallel site, the other was this bucolic ranch land in Lane County. And then we got the opportunity to work on a terrible site. And actually, this was kind of turning point for the firm in some level. The idea of when you're working on difficult sites, sites that maybe don't have a view, that have really a lot of traffic, they're kind of hemmed in by other buildings. You think, what can you do with this? And that's what the beauty of the design is that it can actually reveal latent opportunities and qualities that are there. And that it's basically takes design. It's almost like inverting Michelangelo's thing about the figure being on the marble. But this is like the space was always there. We just have to define it. And that's what we do as architects. We actually, medium is our medium is space. We're essentially putting structure around it to kind of make it habitable, make it useful, and make it beautiful. The work of Gordon Matter Clark has always been an inspiration. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. In the 1970s, conceptual artist who would carve up buildings. And this is a building in Paris that was otherwise going to be torn down to the Pompidou Museum. And before doing that, he basically did this piece called Conical Intersect, and basically carved these spaces through this whole building. But these were like, this was maybe someone's bedrooms, and his kitchen. And who knew there was this dynamic space in that? But it was always there. So, I mean, it was fabulous. The other thing that's so interesting too is thinking that it's a rock flower, but the idea that we can find like a kind of constrained crevice and beauty can come out. So, these early projects that wrestled with these conditions really became an inspiration of the art of our practice. And the first was, one of the first was a project on the corner of Guerrero Street and 14th Street in the Mission District, San Francisco, 201 Guerrero Street. This was working with a developer that actually Sarina had been working with, and then a good friend of ours named Addison Strong, who's also an architect and classmate at graduate school. He collaborated with us on this project. But it's a simple mixed-use building. It's a retail space in the ground floor and 3 townhouse units above. Guerrero Street is a very busy street. 14th Street is more has like neighborhood sort of character to it, but they're both kind of like very busy streets and with car traffic. But when we first went here with the developer, we stood patty corner from this site, and it was this kind of rundown liquor store, 1-story liquor store building on the site. And then you have the blank walls and the adjacent buildings hemming it in. With all this traffic, it's kind of in a valley, no views. And our client said, "Oh, I want to do something that's never been seen before in San Francisco on this site." It's like, okay. So this finished in, it's a pretty early project. It's finished in 2004. And we basically treated these 2 sides, so high traffic side of Guerrero, which also faces west. That's this big copper boomerang. And then as it turns around onto the north facing side, facing 14, it's one with the glass crystalline volumes. But this is one actual house. Someone can say, that's my house, and actually it's called the copper house. That's the footprint of it. And this brings up another issue. In San Francisco, corner buildings are kind of like uncelebrated. Right? The typical San Francisco real house is a formal front, a backyard, and the house happens in between. Corner buildings don't have backyards. They don't have that open space. And so what we did was invert that equation and put open space on the roof. So these are vertical townhomes for pretty interesting sections. We use the backyard, so to speak, with more than 15-foot wide space as like a driveway access parking garages, but also it's a nice driveway, so it's like a courtyard. And you have these students that come up from there into the units. The units are 3 stories, bedroom, living in the middle, bedroom on top. Building that's a little hanging mezzanine, and that's in a second to a glass stair to a roof deck that's split level across the 2 units. The retail down below with the basement. The floor plans, it shows that courtyard in the back. The whole lot is, I think it's like 58 by 50, so it's really narrow, actually a very small design. Interior spaces, because of this verticality, this is actually the front door that you see over here. Going through the front door, this wall is 37 feet tall. Here goes all the way up to this clear story window that faces south, so you get angling sunlight coming down all that distance. And above is this, it's literally hanging. It's a little mezzanine with pipes that go to stout beams in the roof, so that we didn't have to have any kind of visual beams. And so the 2 units that are not on the corner are this one on the left. The one on the right in the corner in the copper bottom, it has a different quality to it. It doesn't have it hanging. It does have actually a hanging mezzanine, but a different sort. The palette is different. It's not sort of blonde woods and things like that. The next project, which Sarina will talk about, but this is the idea of like finding space within an existing building, finding opportunities within that.
So the client for this project didn't want to have to do neighborhood notification, and we found a loophole that if you didn't have, she wanted a big back deck, and if you didn't have any columns touching the ground, you didn't have to do neighborhood notification.
I don't think they intended it that way, but it was a great loophole.
So we still got her huge cantilever deck without the columns, but these are pictures of the original house, the front on Waller Street, and then the back. And she wanted to open it up and have it work better for a modern family with 3 kids, but also not blow it out completely, still have the scale of the feeling of the scale of the old original Victorian house, while also still having bedrooms for each child. So that was a lot to fit in the upper level.
3 kids.
Mhm.
It was interesting. We call it the Janus house. It has 2 faces. It fronts 2 streets. And in the front of the building, actually, was quite a lovely facade, ugly colors, but really intact. And because it had the back access, no one ever put a garage on the front, which is unusual. That's why it actually was this charm. So then with Waller Street on the north side, we had a stoop, that existing stoop. We kind of created another kind of reciprocal stoop on the back, but it's internal. So that even though, you can have interior space that has a kind of hierarchy of like interiority of like a room, and then you have an open plan space that kind of has a more of an externality to it. And so that stoop comes down. Now here are these little vessels, these little like kind of
Pods.
set piece pods, yeah, exactly. For the bedrooms for the kids, and each one has a different character to it. Each one has its own little kind of loft. The primary bedroom for the parents is down here facing south. This daughter had this little loft that was above the bathroom that the parents used. This one has a little hanging loft that you'll see in a second, and this one needs to have access to the attic up front. So it's cool. But those are all found. It's all just flat ceilings in there. And we just kind of like went up in the attic. Like, wow, look at all the space up in here. So it's cool. It's like, once again, the space was there. It is like, there's the big counter down. Facing the Germania Street at the south side of the car access, and lots of glass at the south side. I love this about San Francisco. It's just like this long city, there's all these different things that happen. Sarina was talking about it. I wanted open plan, but I didn't want to lose a sense of scale. So view from the front door in the back instead of going out to preserve it.
Kept the old railing.
We actually exposed the structure here and actually intentionally made a kind of a big deal of it, like steel beams dropped below the joists so that it could give the space that it needs. One of the big buildings, mezzanine in the skylight. That's better. So the backs to internals to. This was one of the truly worst sites that we ever got. This is on Nob Hill, which sounds great, Nob Hill, but it's on Pine Street, which if anyone knows San Francisco, Pine Street's like a freeway, so it's one-way street, it's big arterial across the city. So that was our frontage here. Across the street was this 17-story rootless building from like the early 70s. And then behind was a 140-foot wall of the Masonic auditorium, just concrete. This was the site of this was a little sort of market here. It was 37 feet wide, 75 feet deep, flanked on both sides by what we call the barbell row houses with little light wells in the middle. So, okay, what do you do with this? And we created this building, which was like a prison, and the 37-foot wide dimension was really nice because it allowed us to get the core, very efficient core down the middle, 2 stairs and an elevator, and flanking units that went front to back, and also around their own light bulbs. We wanted to make this place to give it a sense of arrival. You can see the street and now traffic there. So we created this lobby, which is a double weight space, but it's essentially a glorified fire stair. We just, we took the fire stair that had to be there and just revealed it, carved back the floors on this level to create this wonderful space here. We perforated it, created this landing that was like a basket that hung from above, water jet texture. Cedar wood is actually the only wood that has the fire flame spread requirement that met the fire code for instance there. So we're the cedar. Garage with parking lots in it, incredibly dense little building that has 8 flats. See the ground floor here. This is the parking lifts. There's this lobby, and then a typical floor plan there where that round stair becomes this kind of pill-shaped element in the living spaces. And it's each 2-bedroom units. So you have bedrooms that face the rear, and then bedrooms that face the left. And the living spaces face south. Now, these bay windows were really interesting because we didn't want just sort of like glass boxes of fish bowls. We wanted something that can modify light. When you're facing south, you think that's great because you can get all this direct sunlight, which is true. But remember, across the street was a very big sort of concrete building. And because that's a north-facing facade, it's always dark. So we wanted to create these bay windows that have different kinds of glass. This is like you can see, like basically a dot pattern, silk screen football and more laminated glass. That create these kind of almost like a show screen. Basically, when something hits it, it diffuses it. So you don't see the dark north side of the building across the street. You see this glowing flame. Between them is a structural shear wall that's clouds at the bottom. Bay windows. Wonderful thing about bay windows, it's free real estate. It goes over the property line, 3 feet. Number 2, you can see longitudinally up and down the streets rather than just looking across the street. Everyone says architects always put on bay windows. Oh, San Francisco, you got to do bay windows. They're awesome. I don't know. Yeah, and they don't have to look like, you think. I mean, these are pretty fully. The sense that refuse light. Top units, we captured the space above the fire stair. So that space would have gone unused otherwise. And we captured it for private stairs, like neck and living rooms, these little mezzanines that then open up to private rooms, like penthouse units. And then we did both these alongside. There's another project in the Mission District. This is a 3-unit infill project. And this was one we just presented to the architecture studio. It occupies half of a lot that was shared with a historic long-term union home here. The site is actually on the site of the first Mission Dolores that was built in 1776. This is the ultimate location of Mission Dolores. There's the Lago de los Dolores, which is the tidal basin that connected all the paths to Mission Bay. So it's actually kind of a historic site. That became significant because we had to be very careful about how much we excavated. So, we work with models. You'll see in a second. We also work with drawings. Serina, we go in the office. We have different sort of methodologies, but I love doing constructive and drawing perspectives. They think the sort of this is like the kind of old school Renaissance method of doing perspective drawings. But here you can see the historic building next door. And this is a very early scheme that was rejected, or we rejected it. It wasn't like it wasn't going in the right direction, but we had some things about it that were kind of interesting. The existing building has this very exuberant bay window, and we want to pick up on that scale with our own sort of exuberant bay windows. So that was modern. Between the two buildings was a driveway that we had to accommodate. It goes down to the basement parking in the old building. That became a constraint. As we started working through the process, it went from a 4-unit building to a 3-unit building. The facade changed. We kept our extravagant bay. But it became this composition of 2 volumes pushing out toward the street from the glass wall set back. And then it was served to kind of break down the volume of this building, make it sort of fit in better with the scale and the cadence of the San Francisco street. There are some of the study models we used. So this was actually the study model where we first landed on what we eventually going to do as our scheme. You can see the sections here in 2 4-story towers, essentially. The front unit was a 4-story townhouse, 1 unit. In the back were 2 staff ones. We call them the street house, the garden house, and the sky house. And then this is the section through the walkway that we entered. Very complex sections. The infill buildings are like watches. They're really difficult to do well. They're incredibly detailed, and inches, half inches matter. Yeah, they go. Our big window, and that's expression on the street, the pedestrians. It's that parking driveway being there. The Lincoln's habitat. An inevitable pole with all the gnarly wires coming off of it.
And the Historic Commission actually liked the way it related to the old building next door. So it was approved.
And part of it was that, I think there was this challenge with the Stanford driveway. You were given a lot of real estate, so we had to factor that. Doing so, having very little steel. And so once we got involved with structural steel and the company was otherwise we're in the building, we went for it and kind of put the front out about 20 feet. And when you go through that gate, you go up some stairs and come out a walkway. It's a this column, this is the one column that's holding up that day window. A very sort of finesse condition at the base of the top. And you can see the entrance to the street house. Now, right here is courtyard, and it's a small courtyard. It's part of the mid-block of Serina for San Francisco. Stairs up to the sky house, and we go to the garden house. There's a view of the street house, which is this vertical, has 5 different levels in it. Townhouse on the street. This is the dining room that's in that little exuberant bay window sticking out. And it's at the end of a street called Camp Street. So you look out these double height living room windows straight up the street to Morello Street. This is the garden house, more intimate feel. Opens to the backyard. And this is the sky house, which you enter on a sleeping level. Because you inverted it. Everyone's down. Living room on top. And so we can say, I was sleeping floor, feel like, oh, come up. So we clad it with 2 cladded panels. And we come up with this angle. It's like a loft-like volume in the attic. And it's great views over it. The last infill project we'll show. But this is another look at ours out in the Richmond district, where 2 streets come together. There have been 2 different city grids that have been platted. And the grid of the Richmond was then interrupted by California Street, which sort of cut through on this weird diagonal. And in so doing, it shaved off these little pieces of the blocks to create these strange little linear blocks. Our block is this one, has 2 buildings on it, ours and the neighboring building. For us was a smog check station, before that, a gas station. So it's always been one of these, a bus stop on this side, a lot of traffic, all this, parking and so forth. Not a great site, but an interesting architectural problem. You can see the building. There's a building here on the site, across the Presidio and the Golden Gate shop. So our strategy was this: we were going to basically create 3 pods, each pod with 2 units in it. They would be lifted off the ground with a storefront on their corner, and then a parking garage under these 2 here. And one of the challenges with all this sort of hubbub of the city around it, when you come home, you don't want to just like come from all that business and just stumble into your house. You want to have some transition, some layers of experience before you get to your home. So we create these little gardens. We have a garden here, garden there, and a garden there. And you come into these gardens first, and then you circulate up, either a back stair or a central stair out. One of the challenges with each pod was that with the ground floor already spoken for, we had 3 floors, but for 2 units. How do you divide 3 by 2? So what we did was have each unit have the whole floor that goes through, and then a half a floor, and the other one interlocks with it. Emergency access for it. This interlocking is like puzzle pieces, but it achieved a couple of goals for the owner. The owner wanted to have light on both sides, and he wanted the main living space to have access to a little private gap. So it will achieve that. The other thing he wanted was this: that the Richmond district is kind of lower density district, known for houses, not so much for apartments. So we wanted this thing to feel like a collection of houses, not apartment flats. And so the project is the realization of this puzzle of fitting together of its pieces. And you see each house has its own identity: 3 white houses, 3 dark blue houses, and they kind of go up and down in this reciprocal fashion. And that's the other side.
Can you give me a sense of square?
So the side of the site, from one end of the site, the other is 126 feet. On the narrow side is 33. It widens up to 44 on the right. Each unit is about is a 3-bedroom unit, and they're about 1,200 square feet, between 12 and 1,300. Because the site tapers, they get bigger. So the corner units are actually larger. These are like 1,500 square feet. This one's 1,600. This one's about, this is like 1,350, and this is like 1,250. They're very efficient as well internally. They're having 3 grand square feet. This is that experience of coming into the court, and then it's this stair corridor first, and then this is the upper living rooms. Most of the buildings in the area are 3 stories, so we're on the 4th floor, we get great views. So it's interesting that the trajectory of our work went from the small projects and started getting bigger and bigger projects and more ambitious projects, bigger developer clients and so forth. But it started begging the question about this idea about place. Everything we've been showing you is essentially these infill buildings kind of express like a nature of place. The place is what happened, like the sense of place, the identity of a place is what comes out of having many hands working on an environment over many years. A lot of great cities are like that. A lot of towns are like that. And the idea that you can have a lot of different discrete pieces coming together to make a coherent whole that has an identity, using the work of Chuck Close as a metaphor, is appealing and really inspirational to us. And that's what drives a lot of our info work. However, when you start looking at the city block, you start to think, you look around, you see a lot of these big developments getting built out of the size of a city block. How do you make a city block contribute to that character of a place in the city? Part of the clue comes from just looking at the variety that happen in a city block. And so 4 city blocks in San Francisco. This is so-called Billionaires Row, I think that term, but it's over on Broadway Pacific, near the Presidio. Or maybe about 18 homes or something. And then here's a city block of real houses over in sort of North area, north of the Panhandle. A denser block in North Beach. that's bisected by alleys to get additional frontage. And then you have a density block in the Tenderloin Union Square, where you have high-rise building, everyone clustered together. It's all within the same 275 by 412 foot piece of land. Fremont. The author Amber Dillon wrote a book called Built for Change about the San Francisco fabric, where she sort of tracks the neighborhood around Alamo Square over time and how the fabric evolved, but yet still retain the sense of like genus loci, the same kind of DNA, even though kind of densified over time. So the first sort of more significant project that we got wasn't first actually, but this is the first we're going to show is an affordable housing project in the South Market area on the corner of 6th and Howard Streets. It's called Bill Sorrell Community. It's for Mercy Housing. It's a 67-unit new ground up building to replace what was called a Hugo Hotel. It's a historic resource. The 6th Street is most people don't think 6th Street is a very nice place to be, but it's a neighborhood with a lot of character actually, and it's considered a historic district. The 6th Street Lodging House Historic District has the greatest concentration of existing lodging houses on the West Coast. This building had been burnt out. There was a fire in 1989, and it has stood burnt out for years and years and years. The owners never wanted to do anything with it. Either was hoping for the city to buy it eventually, which is what happened. But meanwhile, artists came in and did these installation, public demonstration of furniture coming out the window. Brian Goggins became pretty famous because it was only supposed to be up for 3 months, ended up being up for 16 years. Because of the historic nature, we had to do this whole typological study of the neighborhood in terms of what we can character defining features and making it compatible with the neighborhood. But at the same time, we're modern architects, and that's not like an ideological standpoint. It's more like this is how we think about space and how we think about structure. But yet you can make modern architecture really at ease with the urban fabric, thinking about the scale, materiality, the cadence, entrances and street activation. All of our intro work is like that. And the planning department loves our work, even though it doesn't seem to fit in what most people think of as San Francisco architecture. But our solution became 2 volumes, masonry volumes, there's a lot of brick building on through. So 2 brick volumes suspended between these 3 exposed concrete shear walls, and then set over a tall double height ground floor storefront. So this is 6 Howard Street on the right, kind of like the Guerrero Street project. Howard Street's like this thoroughfare, and then 6th Street is more of a neighborhood kind of friendly pedestrian street. The strategy of doing 2 volumes worked with the program, which was family housing. Family housing consisting of 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, 1-bedroom units, and studio apartments. And so most of the ones in studios are facing on 6th Street, where it can have that finer grain. It's divided up more, and then the 2s and 3s are in this more planar volume on Howard Street. The materials, you see these are big concrete shear walls exposed, and then there's brick volumes here. It's a 9-story building still, but it's not considered a high rise. And it's very technical, but in order to meet those fire codes and still have the 9th floor and make the floor to floor heights very, very tight, 8'11". By doing that, they suddenly seemed like that kind of dimension felt weird next to the sort of bigger dimension of the older buildings. So we did this kind of story group, a 1, a 2, and a 3-story group, and that kind of gave a more ambiguous sense of scale of the building. It's a device we use a lot because there's a great restaurant in the corner called Eating's Kitchen. Mercy Housing is amazing at commercial lending and leasing. Commercial leasing, they get great community serving retail into their buildings. Beanie was a alumna of the La Cocina, which is a nonprofit incubator space in the Mission District. And it's Nepalese food. They make fabulous momos. Let's see. This is the lobby to the building. The building's named after Bill Sorrell, who is a housing activist of Filipino origin. And this mural and ceramics was made by his nephew. This is the lobby of a community room through the glass doors on the side, mailboxes and stuff. They exposed, the board formed concrete in the lobby to expose those shear structural elements coming through, but then contrasted with wood and one to brick on the outside. It's actually what we call thin brick. It's a thin brick veneer over metal framing. It's not true brick, because true brick doesn't like earthquakes. And we use two different thicknesses, so we have this kind of banding, different kind of texture that goes up. In the middle of this facade is a giant window. It's 5 stories tall, basically, and it has double height spaces that bring light into the corridors, and then like a children's play. And that's one of those double height spaces. And on top, where the building steps down visually, that's actually that's well resistant.
It was important to bring light into the corridors.
We're trying to do that in many projects. We can, one market rate developers push back on it, because we want to maximize the floor area, but, in affordable housing, it's actually, the common spaces have to be really nice, because
The occupancy levels in an affordable housing project are much higher. Basic sort of occupant limits are a 3-bedroom unit. You multiply the bedroom, you count by 2, and then add 1. So a 3-bedroom unit can have 7, 2-bedroom unit can have 5, and 1-bedroom with 3. And they almost all have that occupancy level. So a lot of people in these buildings, and a lot of kids. And so having nice common spaces, corridors where people can actually hang out and socialize. 4 times. So you know, something like that's like one of the units where we show all those recessed windows. We use those recesses, the reciprocal side of those recesses for storage spaces and all insurance. So we have a very small backyard. It gets very light in the face of southwest. Balcony is a foot orientation because they're coming off a different type of units, so 3 and 2 bedroom backyard. So it's part of that. 3. It's a different kind of difficult site. It's a bigger block. This is called the M building, and part of the 2 building complex. This is in the dog patch area neighborhood that was recently rezoned from industrial to allow multi-family residential. And this site was alongside of like I-280. So kind of a horrible site. And there were warehouses there before. There was a nightclub called Pocket Cooking. This is 18th Street Bridge over here. And it shows, let's say, it's 350 feet long and 75 feet deep. And so there are 2 separate standalone buildings sitting on top of the county department. And then this plaza called Dog Patch Arts Plaza was a reclaiming of the stud end of the street in an urban place. With a cafe, an arts cafe that spill out the tables, CMG landscape architecture designs. There was multiple from CMG sitting right here. And CMG also did all the street sweeping very much, but it's actually very cleverly done. It was all stormwater treatment projects, but they're beautiful, and it makes for this wonderful streetscape. And our building is this one, the M building, so-called because that's the shape of M in plan. And this was sort of, this kind of conceit of like, folding. How do you, in a neighborhood that wasn't residential, how do you now create a sense of residential quality in this? And this kind of metaphor of folding, where that you basically you take, starting with a straight line, fold it, make it letter M. That's essentially what we're doing here. Is basically creating additional perimeter. We couldn't have units facing the freeway because of the noise and the pollution. Also, this is actually technically a firewall. So we had to create these courtyards and create additional perimeter facing the street. And it gave us opportunity to create buildings which felt like multiple buildings, felt like we wanted to take the building in pieces. These other courts. So also bay windows, these are sticking out over the property line. And then where the actual front door is right here. And we mark that entrance with this white tower. And the studio units in on top is this wonderful barbecue, it's like the barbecue temple. Roof deck of the building.
And it's with elevator.
It's, yeah. This is where the common parking garage comes out. So this is the ground floor plan.
So another thing that we did that most people don't do in multifamily housing. Everyone in multifamily housing, people stack everything exactly from the top to the bottom. That is the most efficient way to do things. However, sometimes it's not the best way to do things. In this case, we didn't stack the floor plans. We basically created a unique plan at the ground floor at the street level on top of the parking podium, so that we can maximize flow and access through these courtyards, and also create stoops in the street frontages here. We were also able to capture some additional square footage. That's how we justified it to the development. And this is the urban interface. We have these beautiful stoops. Here are these rainwater planters that CMG designed. It's actually one continuous planter with both rings across it. It's really cool. And then we turn, go up. This idea of like hitting on a different material. It's like back to the sensory thing. Like the material has a different sound when we step on it. It's this metal grate. And then when you get to the top, those two steps, you turn and you go up, you turn again to the door. All those little moves create those layers that separate privacy from, domestic environment from the urban environment. So here's this little, actually a publicly accessible open space for private. There goes a little ramp. This is actually a disabled access ramp that creates the access traffic travel. It's a lobby. Belt installation that we designed and built in the office, and expressing that folding idea. And then the outer courts at nighttime, beautifully lit. Lobby very lean, because once again, market rate development, maximize rentable floor area, don't give it away.
And tight budget.
Yeah, and tight. But we made the most of it. It's typical for floor plan. This is 2-bedroom units here. Studio units between them. You can size some of these units. We use this a lot, the sloping roof. Loophole in code, planning code that allows you to measure a height limit to the midpoint of the sloping roof. And that allows us to get this little mezzanine extra space in at the top of these units. So these are like these tall loft-like units that then can open to these private roof decks that have views out to these. Tower corner, barbecue in the fireplace area. All right. Go through this quickly.
Yeah.
Last really projects. Actually, second last, but this is another affordable housing project in Mission Bay, 1184th Street, that we did in conjunction with Daniel Solomon, design partners at the time, and Malcolm Harris. Daniel Solomon's office was the project manager. It's 150 units of affordable housing. Challenge here was a new city block within a neighborhood that had no existing character. They actually started designing this when all this was parking lots around here. So how do you design contextually when there's nothing around it? And this is the building on the corner. This was working with a redevelopment agency who had to approve it. So they wanted the building to have a very strong presence on this corner and really express the kind of knife edge. The ground floor is all retail, 11,000 square feet of retail, community center, and townhomes. So those townhomes. Very strong was landscape architect here. So a play court for the 260 kids living in the building. And then the other one of the other street faces is the Ben's the obtuse corner, the cafe. And the courtyard's in the middle, there's a community room. Here is a beautiful luminous space, light on both sides, mural by Julie Chang. The corridors upstairs, the same trick, doing the double height space. You get these beautiful views out of the city, light to the corridors. This is actually the thoughtful unit that belongs to the member. This is Cafe Reveille, one of the retail spaces on that upstairs corner, that last corner. Mercy Housing locked them in. They're kind of known as to be kind of fancy, but they required, as a requirement of their lease, that they have items on the menu that people in the building can afford to buy. Projects, this multifamily projects. This is 1150 Clay Street. It's our first high-rise building in Oakland. This is it's basically a 16-story building that's like a bundle of 4 structures pulled together. It didn't start out that way. We were actually hired initially to do a skin job. This was the previous design. One iteration of design, second iteration. I'm not going to say the designs. But we were hired initially.
But then turned out it wasn't penciling either. And so we actually completely redesigned the whole thing. We had 26,000 square feet, 26 units, squeeze in an extra floor, and then refill out the massing. So step one, change the massing. There's a slight topographic change across the site. We shifted the heights of the buildings to accentuate that. A double-story grouping for the floors so that we can have it be more similar to the commercial buildings that are around it. It's in city center. We have government buildings and office buildings. The stacking of the mechanical systems, and then working with window variations because we had a budget that actually cut the glazing cost. Really sketch.
Oh, maybe that's.
But it's a unitized, prefabricated factory built skin. Made in Southern California. We've got these nice recessed corner windows. You can see the different volumes. Sort of cluster of 4 volumes, ground floor retail, 2 retail spaces and a lobby in between. Entrance to the lobby, which we differentiated from the retail by doing spins. These are actually about 30 feet tall from here down there, 20 feet tall here of wood. The glue lamp beams turn on. The interiors. This wonderful experience of cold materials, hard materials, textured materials, natural materials. And the wood slats, textured marble, concrete. From upstairs, the wood slats, the fabric panels, soften the acoustics. And then we get this compression up the stairs. There's this brand space below. And up above, it's actually it's 7 foot 10 inches ceilings. These are co-working lounges. This kind of sense of prospect refuge and tucked up there. They're super comfortable. And we use the fluted glass to create luminosity, but still create privacy. And roof deck is fabulous, angular feel. Landscape architect designed the roof deck. You can collaborate with them. Building also shares an open plaza. The structure that we designed in a shipping container kitchen for a future restaurant. The basketball court, the wonderful art fence by artist Ben Troutman. Now, just 2 projects that are on the boards. This is looking to the future of San Francisco. This is the first high-rise affordable housing building project in San Francisco. That's for low-income families. It's a 17-story building. We're also doing Mercy Housing in the Trans-Bay District. And it has 2 tiers. When you're doing high-rise with all families and all the kids, 184 units, you have to think about all the different kinds of spaces that people can socialize, hang out, be outside. So we have 3 social hubs, a double-height lobby, double-height community room open to a wonderful roof terrace. And then on the 16th floor, another community space and terrace. In the middle is a 6,000 square foot child care center. It's being operated by Wu Yi. In the courtyard in the middle. And the other thing to talk about is about the future of San Francisco. This is the Civic Center Public Realm Plan. This is the master planning side of our firm. This is a collaboration with CMG Landscape Architects. We actually led the charge on this with the planning department. And we're brought on board to handle the architectural aspects and sort of collaborating with CMG. Doing landscape in San Francisco almost always involves working with the buildings because sometimes there's buildings underneath you, the frontages, how those buildings can activate the landscape is very important. 2 ideas predominated. One was bringing back an urban forest character to this lake. Creating, I think there's over 400 trees proposed in this area. But still, so that all these spaces, they can work as part of a neighborhood park for the neighborhood, the Tenderloin neighborhood and South Market area, that people can come here and use it on a daily basis, but also have the capability to use this big space as the wonderful civic gathering space that Civic Center Plaza is today, where you can sometimes have 80,000, 100,000 people. Create architectural pavilions that activate some of the gateways into the park. This is a pavilion that gives access to the parking garage underneath the plaza. Has public bathrooms and a cafe. Not quite the 10, but almost getting there. The Bill Graham Civic Auditorium was an example of a building with a very kind of dead pedestrian frontage that we created ways to make interventions in that, create ground floor retail and other active uses that would activate it when there isn't a concert there, which is basically 95% of waking hours. And then over on the UN Plaza, creating a new series of pavilions Basically, we have a market hall on the ground floor, community space above, and a new access to the Union Plaza transit station, which is Muni and Bart. Right now, this is a pretty grim hole in the ground escalator that's really nasty. And so the idea that this would just be a luminous lantern that people could follow the Civic Center Plaza. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions. If you want to just raise your hand and Serena will call on you.
That's good. What's the time frame for all of this?
For the Civic Center? What? We don't know. Basically, we did the master plan, working with 8 different city agencies, and it went into the environmental review process. And it's basically being slow walked through that. It doesn't have very strong political advocacy for it right now, which is unfortunate. But we're trying to work on that. And everyone agrees something needs to be done. It is the most important public space in the city that's not a park. And it's not living up to its potential right now. So this idea of bringing amenities, bringing services, making it neighborhood friendly, but also civic and grand, and activating the buildings around it is just, it's a wonderful idea. And so we don't know yet.
Regarding that project, I know around where the old bar entrance was, they just recently did that. I think it was like it's skateboard.
Yeah.
Trying to activate. Is that part of that master plan? Or
No, it's like it's more like a temporary intervention. I think there was a lot of illicit activities going on there. And they thought the Parks Department thought that was a way to kind of create sort of healthy activity there that would then they moved the farmers market to the next block over. Farmers market's a wonderful thing. It's one of the things that's really successful and active down there.
yeah, now it's in the middle.
Now it's in the middle, I know, yeah.
I mean, is your master plan accounting for those, 2 pretty vibrant uses?
Our master plan would basically call for having the farmers market back in the middle, back where it is at Union Plaza. And then creating other opportunities for skateboarding, activities, other sports, and in that zone, that space between the public library and the Asian Art Museum, and also within Civic Center Plaza itself.
Which way works better?
I don't know. I mean, I've been down there to see the skateboarders. I mean, it's facing Market Street, and to feel like this, I mean, our kids skateboard, I'm all supportive of it, but I feel like, this is should be a great civic space, and it's really, it doesn't really, what else can happen there while that's going on, I think it's good. I think it's better than what was maybe happening there before in terms of some of the illicit activities, the fencing of goods and whatnot, drug dealing and whatever, but it's, it has much more potential in it.
I will say, with CMG, the building that Kennerly and Sarina have come up with for the bar thing, it's such an obvious solution and positive, transformative addition to that Union Plaza. And part of the motivation for doing something grander at the entrance was that BART is already planning to rebuild the entrance there anyway. So the idea was to leverage that investment for something more significant. We'll see.
We'll see.
It's a great building.
So if it happens, I mean, that's the thing, the plan is designed to be implemented sequentially. It doesn't all have to be done at once. It's so much for people to get their brains around, frankly. That's one of the challenges of it. But UN Plaza is its own sort of piece. If the BART station, if let's say that building or something like it got built and had the kind of mix of uses with community uses upstairs, market hall down below, which we envision to augment the farmers market with retail uses that require infrastructure that a farmers market doesn't have, like a fishmonger, a butcher, a baker, whatever, that you could have those uses there and still have the seasonal produce market outside. But if that happened and you had this new lantern of a transit access, it would be a game changer. I mean, the whole thing, I think, would just start rolling in a good way. The space between the library and the Asian Art Museum is also one of those similar spaces. It could be taken as its own thing and actually really sort of made this wonderful urban room. And it should be. Right now, it's basically a glorified parking lot. And then Civic Center Plaza is a more complex undertaking, but you know, those things can be handled in 3 different tranches.
We proposed that to Mayor Breed. She needs something for her campaign.
It's so cool if she got on board with it.
That's like trees.
I mean, there was exhaustive public outreach done as part of this process, all these public workshops. You know, there were about what 7 different languages the outreach was done in. I mean, it's really complex outreach process. Interethnica was the consultant that did you guys hire them or the planning department? To manage that outreach, and repeatedly over and over again, more nature, more trees, more places for people to be closer to nature. And it was like universal kind of feedback. So for the mayor to say that she doesn't like trees, it's kind of ridiculous.
Well, we can appeal to 2 other leading candidates.
Yeah, that's right.
Really, I think we should win that.
That's a great, yeah, sure.
It's, we're gonna have kind of a very visionary scheme to turn around San Francisco, get rid of all the negative and embrace positive.
That's actually a really cool idea.
Yeah.
They're pushing it for those candidates.
I know it gets political and
But yeah, everything gets political in some.
There's a person in the back.
Okay, well,
I was curious, who's your structural engineer for the Jan's house?
oh, that was David Strandberg. And he was the same engineer as the Albion Street project with the big cantilever and the crazy column. Wonderful engineer.
So since the theme of this year's lecture series is composition, in looking at your guys' portfolio, you're really masters of like asymmetrical composition. And also the volumetric pushing and pulling. Where does that passion come from? And can you talk a little more about how you compose elevations and get to those solutions?
Thanks for asking, by the way. As I know we were wondering, like, should we talk about composition explicitly? I think, yeah, when we were thinking about composition, there's graphic composition, like when you see in a beautiful painting. But those are absorbed and sort of consumed, if you will, visually at once. Someone looks at it and they understand the full thing. Architecture is different. You have an architectural composition that unfolds through experience and through time, by walking through it, by living with it, by seeing it in different light, in different weather, and you can understand how the spaces relate to each other. Because you're not really like in a drone looking down on the project and seeing these things, you know. But in terms of our facades, I mean, we like to, you know, when we approach a project, we were talking to the class about this earlier. Let's say we're working with a developer. We think about 3 things simultaneously. Number 1, they have their program and their pro forma. They need to get X amount of square feet sellable in order to make their pro forma work, or what have you. And with so many bedrooms or how many square feet of retail space or whatever. So we think about that. And simultaneously, we're thinking about what is the quality of the interior spaces? How can we meet that program? Be very clever so that we can make these wonderful interior spaces that maybe they didn't even imagine could have existed within that program. And then simultaneously make a great street frontage, make a great urban environment. Because the building has to do all 3. You know, it serves 3 masters. It serves the city at large, it serves the occupants, and it serves the person that's actually paying to build it. So you know, when we think about facades, you know, we're sort of thinking about that sort of marriage of internal. We don't think about facades as just these masks that are put on a building, but rather an expression of the internal program. So that we'll kind of actually manipulate the internal program to make for a wonderful composition on the facade. And that's not a conceit. It's actually more like what is like with that Albion Street project, the idea of having these 2 volumes thrusting out in this recessed glass wall was kind of a response to the fact that it was viewed from a long street that was coming in perpendicular, number 1. Number 2, that is west facing. So pulling that glass wall in actually created this thin wall that shades it in the afternoon, plus the trellis overhead. And then the volumes that push out are kind of more solid and opaque. So there's a kind of comfort and environmental side to it as well as meaning this kind of programmatic idea.
But you can also get a balanced composition when it's asymmetrical. By the how, you know, even when they're different between the 2 sides, you know.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's what dynamic symmetry is
It's like the term that's been used for that, like, or, yeah, dynamic symmetry, where it has balance, but it's not just mirror imaging. So,
Thank you so much. You think can take you over.
No, that was beautiful work.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Do you have
It's
the
so
information
wonderful.
for that structural name?
So much. Thank you.
Yeah, Strandberg Engineering. You can write that down, Strandberg
Oh,
Engineering, they're based in San Francisco.
Thanks so much for coming.
It's a lot of.
oh, Google them, that's probably the easiest thing nowadays. So Strandberg.
Yeah, STRANDBEERG.
Berg Engineering. Oh, there we go.
Thank you so much. It's amazing presentation.
Thank you.
So in love with your project.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Oh, they're pretty large, actually.
Yes.
Excellent.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for coming as always.
Yeah.
Big coverage.
Yeah, they do work. They do a lot of high-end residential. They do some mixed use work. That's not. Stanley said.
Oh, they're big. Last time.
David.